My name is Emily Bennett. I'm 29 years old. For almost 4 years, every opportunity one fought for somehow disappeared before I could reach it. Job interviews were cancelled. Apartment applications were suddenly rejected. Even volunteer positions I had already been accepted for somehow vanished overnight. At first, I blamed bad luck. Then I blamed myself. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe I just wasn't good enough. What I didn't know was that someone had been destroying my future long before I even had a chance to build it. And that someone shared my last name. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday morning in Maple Falls, Virginia. For nearly 6 months, I had been sleeping at a small church shelter on the edge of town. That morning, a woman wearing a charcoal gray coat walked through the front door carrying a worn leather portfolio. She looked around the room until our eyes met. Emily Bennett? I slowly stood. Yes. She smiled politely. I've been looking for you. Those 6 words changed everything. The week I finally understood the difference between being alive and actually living. Maple Falls was the kind of town where everyone recognized your truck before they recognized your face. About 5,000 people. 1 grocery store. 1 high school. 1 family diner that hadn't changed its menu in 20 years. People trusted each other there. Or at least, they thought they did. My parents, Richard and Susan Bennett, were among the most respected people in town. My father managed the regional warehouse for one of the county's largest construction suppliers. Everyone knew him as a hard-working man who could solve almost any problem. My mother worked as the bookkeeper at a family-owned medical clinic. She organized charity fundraisers every holiday season and never missed a church event. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect American family. Inside our house, they controlled every part of my life. I didn't have my own bank account. Every paycheck I earned from my cafe job went into a joint account my parents controlled. If I wanted to buy a pair of shoes, I had to explain why. If I wanted to drive outside the county, I needed permission. When I told my father I wanted to attend community college, he didn't even look up from his newspaper. College fills people's heads with useless dreams, he said. You already have everything a young woman needs. So I stayed. I worked. Cooked dinner. Cleaned the house. Paid bills with money I wasn't allowed to touch. And little by little, I forgot what freedom even felt like. Until one ordinary Tuesday evening. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes when I noticed my reflection in the dark window. I looked exhausted. Not because I worked too much. Because I couldn't remember the last decision I had made for myself. That thought terrified me. If nothing changed, I'd still be standing at that same sink 15 years later. The next morning, before anyone woke up, I drove to the public library. Using one of the old computers near the back wall, I created my very first private email address. Then I applied for a full-time office assistant position in the nearby city of Oak Ridge. 45 minutes away. Far enough to finally start over. When I pressed submit, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid. Because, for the first time in years, I felt hope. I honestly believed my life was finally beginning. I had no idea. Someone was already making a phone call to make sure it never would. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was helping close the cafe. The number was unfamiliar. Hello? Hi, is this Emily Bennett? Yes. My name is Karen. I'm calling from Oak Ridge Financial Services. My heart nearly stopped. We'd like to invite you in for an interview tomorrow morning. I accepted before she could finish the sentence. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't stop smiling. That night, I carefully ironed my only white blouse. I polished a pair of shoes I'd worn since high school. For the first time in years, I felt excited about tomorrow. The interview couldn't have gone better. Karen greeted me with a warm smile. The office manager asked thoughtful questions. We laughed more than once. When I left the building, I caught myself imagining what life might look like. A small apartment. My own mailbox. Coffee every morning before work. A paycheck with my name on it. 2 days later, Karen called again. Emily. We'd love to offer you the position. I covered my mouth to stop myself from crying. When can you start? Monday. Everything was finally changing. Or so I believed. Friday afternoon, less than 24 hours before I was supposed to sign the paperwork, my phone rang again. This time, Karen sounded different. Her cheerful voice had disappeared. Emily. I'm so sorry. We're going in another direction. The room became strangely quiet. I don't understand. There was a long pause. Then she sighed. This isn't easy to say. We received a phone call this morning. A man claimed to know your family. He said you had been arrested for financial fraud 2 years ago. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? That's impossible. I've never even been inside a police station. I know, Karen answered softly. You sounded genuine. But our owners don't want to take the risk. I sat in my car outside the cafe for almost an hour. Unable to move. Unable to cry. Unable to understand why this kept happening. When I finally drove home, my father was grilling burgers in the backyard. He smiled as if nothing had happened. How was your interview? For a second, I wondered if he somehow already knew. It was fine, I answered quietly. He flipped another burger. See? I told you. Good opportunities don't come as easily as people think. That sentence stayed with me all night. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Like he already knew the outcome. Like he had been expecting it. That was the first time. I wondered whether this was really bad luck. Or something much darker. I tried to convince myself it had all been a coincidence. People lose jobs every day. Businesses change their minds. Maybe I had simply been unlucky. But that thought didn't survive for long. Over the next 6 weeks, I applied for 4 more jobs. A receptionist position at a dental office. A customer service representative for an insurance agency. An office clerk at a shipping company. And a cashier position at a large home improvement store. Every single employer contacted me. Every single employer wanted an interview. And every single interview ended exactly the same way. At first, everything felt promising. Managers smiled. They complimented my resume. They talked about training schedules and start dates. Then, within a day or two, each opportunity disappeared. The excuses were always different. We decided to promote internally. We've frozen hiring. The position has been filled. After the 4th rejection, I stopped believing the explanations. Something wasn't right. One Monday afternoon, I received another interview invitation. This time, it was from Blue Horizon Insurance in the neighboring city of Fairview. The hiring manager, Melissa, seemed genuinely excited to meet me. The interview lasted almost an hour. Before I left, she walked me to the lobby. I think you'd fit in really well here, she said with a smile. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to hope again. The next morning my phone rang. It was Melissa. Her voice sounded nervous. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you ever been charged with identity theft? I nearly dropped my phone. What? No. Never. There was another uncomfortable silence. I'm sorry, she whispered. We received a phone call early this morning. A woman claimed she was a close family friend. She said she'd feel guilty if she didn't warn us. My heart started pounding. What exactly did she say? Melissa hesitated. She told us you've been investigated several times. That you manipulate people. And that hiring you would be a mistake. I closed my eyes. This wasn't random anymore. Someone was calling my employers. Someone knew exactly where I was applying. Someone wanted to make sure I never escaped. That evening I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying one question in my mind. How could anyone know where I was applying? I had never told my friends. I never mentioned it at work. Then another thought appeared. Quiet. Terrifying. Every single application had been submitted. From the computer in our living room. The same computer my parents used every evening. The same computer where every email remained logged in. Suddenly. Every rejection made perfect sense. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the computer. Around midnight, after my parents had gone to bed, I quietly walked into the living room. The old desktop was still on. My email account was open. Nothing looked unusual. No sent messages. No strange files. No evidence. I was about to shut it down when something caught my attention. The browser history. Someone had searched for every company I'd applied to. Every single one. The searches had been made only hours after I'd submitted my applications. My stomach tightened. I clicked on one of the websites. The contact page had been opened. The hiring manager's direct phone number had been highlighted. I checked another company. The same thing. Another. The same again. Whoever had done this wasn't guessing. They knew exactly who to call. I quickly took photos of the screen with my phone before clearing the browser history from my account. My hands were shaking. For the first time. I wasn't imagining things. I had proof that someone inside this house was following every step I took. The next morning, I decided not to confront anyone. Not yet. Instead, I created another email address using my phone. One my parents had never seen. Then I borrowed a laptop from the public library and applied for a receptionist position at Evergreen Dental Group in Lakewood, nearly 60 miles away. I told absolutely no one. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. Not even my parents. 3 days later. The clinic called. The office manager, Rachel, sounded cheerful. We'd love to meet you on Friday. The interview went perfectly. Rachel even introduced me to 2 employees and showed me the desk where I'd be working. Before I left, she smiled. I'll call you Monday morning. Driving home, I finally relaxed. There was no way anyone could know this time. No shared computer. No family email. No paper applications lying around the house. This one was safe. Monday came. 9 o'clock. Nothing. 10 o'clock. Still nothing. At 10:43, my phone finally rang. It was Rachel. But before she even spoke, I knew. I'm so sorry, Emily. My heart sank. Someone came into the clinic this morning. I froze. What do you mean? A woman. She said she was your aunt. She begged us not to hire you. I couldn't breathe. Rachel continued quietly. She said you've struggled with severe mental health issues. That you've stolen money from family members. And that your relatives have spent years trying to help you. There was a long silence. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Did she tell you her name? Rachel hesitated. No. But she looked a lot like you. At that moment, I didn't need to hear another word. I knew exactly who had walked into that clinic. And for the first time in my life, I realized my own mother wasn't trying to protect me. She was making sure I never escaped. I didn't confront my mother. Not that day. Not that week. If she had really gone to the clinic pretending to be my aunt, she would simply lie. And without proof, no one would believe me. Instead, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I started paying attention. Every conversation. Every phone call. Every little detail. It didn't take long to notice something strange. Whenever I mentioned leaving town, even casually, my parents exchanged quick glances. Tiny ones. Barely noticeable. But once I saw them, I couldn't stop seeing them. A few days later, while my mother was grocery shopping, her cell phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up. A message appeared. Unknown number. Did she find another job yet? Before I could read another word, my mother walked back inside. I quickly looked away. She grabbed the phone almost immediately. Her smile disappeared the second she saw the screen. Then she looked at me. For just a moment. Her expression wasn't loving. It wasn't concerned. It was fear. That evening, I made a decision. If someone was helping my parents, I needed to know who. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Saturday afternoon, my parents left to attend a neighborhood barbecue. They expected me to stay home and clean the garage. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, I went straight to my father's home office. His desk was always locked. But after years of living in that house, I knew exactly where he hid the spare key. Inside the bottom drawer was a thick accordion folder labeled Personal. Inside were insurance papers, tax returns, old utility bills. Nothing unusual. Then I found another envelope. No label. Just dozens of printed pages. Every page had my name at the top. My job applications. Interview confirmations. Copies of emails I'd never printed. There were handwritten notes in the margins. Called March 12th. Manager believed me. Application withdrawn. I felt sick. My father had been keeping records. Like it was a business project. Then I found the final page. A handwritten list. People to contact. Karen. Melissa. Rachel. Every hiring manager I'd spoken to. Besides, several names were check marks. Others had phone numbers. Some had notes. Very trusting. Needed convincing. Call wife if unavailable. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't overprotective parenting. This was a carefully planned campaign. Years of lies. Years of manipulation. Years of making sure I stayed exactly where they wanted me. I quickly photographed every page and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. As I locked the drawer, I heard a car door slam outside. My parents were home. I barely made it back to the kitchen before the front door opened. My father smiled. Garage finished? I forced myself to smile back. Almost. For the first time in my life, I lied to him. And somehow, it felt like the first truly free decision I had ever made. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those handwritten notes. Manager believed me. Application withdrawn. Those weren't just words. They were proof that my parents had stolen years of my life. By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I needed someone to believe me. During my lunch break, I drove to the Oak Ridge Police Department. The officer at the front desk listened politely while I explained everything. I showed him the photographs from my father's file. He studied them for several minutes before looking back at me. Miss Bennett. These papers are disturbing. But they don't prove a crime. I stared at him. What do you mean? He folded his hands. If your father called employers and gave his opinion, that's difficult to prosecute, even if his intentions were malicious. I felt my last bit of hope slipping away. So there's nothing you can do? I'm afraid not. But... He paused. If someone knowingly made false statements that caused you financial harm, you may have grounds for a civil lawsuit. It wasn't the answer I wanted. But it was something. Before leaving, the officer handed me a business card. There are attorneys in Oak Ridge who specialize in employment law. If anyone can help you, they can. That afternoon I called the first lawyer on the list. Then the second. Neither could meet for weeks. The third office answered immediately. Law offices of Daniel Harper. The receptionist listened carefully. Then she surprised me. Mr. Harper has a cancellation tomorrow morning. Can you be here at 9? The next morning, I walked into the downtown office carrying a folder full of photographs. Daniel Harper looked to be in his early 40s. Calm. Professional. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. For almost an hour, he studied every page without interrupting me. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. Emily. I believe you. Those 3 words nearly made me cry. Then his expression became serious. But believing you, and proving it in court, are 2 very different things. He tapped one of the photographs. These notes suggest planning. But they don't prove who actually contacted the employers. I felt my shoulders sink. So, I'm out of options? He smiled slightly. No. I think your parents have made one mistake. What mistake? They've become overconfident. He closed the folder. And overconfident people usually stop being careful. Then he looked directly at me. I think we should give them one more opportunity to expose themselves. For the first time in months, I finally felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The next morning, Daniel called me before I even left for work. I have a plan, he said. It only works if your parents believe they've won. The idea sounded almost too simple. I would apply for one more job. A job that didn't actually exist. Daniel's law firm had a longtime client who owned a commercial office building in Riverton, about an hour away. One empty office would temporarily become the headquarters of a fake consulting company. There would be a website, a business phone, even fake interview schedules. Everything looked completely legitimate. But every phone call, every visitor, every conversation would be documented. If someone contacts the company to sabotage your application, Daniel explained, we'll finally know exactly who it is. For the first time in years. I smiled without forcing it. 3 days later, my resume was submitted. Exactly as before. Only this time, every step was carefully monitored. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning. I deliberately left a printed copy of the confirmation email on the kitchen table. Not by accident. I wanted my parents to see it. That evening my father picked up the paper. Another interview? He sounded almost amused. Yes. In Riverton. He nodded slowly. That's a long drive. I know. I think it'll be worth it. He smiled. The same calm smile I'd seen dozens of times before another opportunity disappeared. Well, I wish you luck. His words sounded kind. His eyes didn't. The next morning, Daniel called. They took the bait. My heart skipped. What happened? At 8:17 this morning. A woman called pretending to be your former supervisor. I stopped breathing. Do you have the recording? We do. But that's not all. At 9:42, a man arrived at the office in person. He introduced himself as Richard Bennett. My father. He insisted on speaking privately with the hiring manager. Daniel paused. He had no idea the hiring manager was one of our investigators. I couldn't believe it. For almost 20 minutes, Daniel continued, your father claimed you were unstable, dishonest, and dangerous to employ. Then, he signed the visitor log, using his real name. There was silence between us. Finally, Daniel spoke again. Emily. We've got him. For the first time in years. I cried. Not because I was hurt. Not because I was afraid. But because after years of being told I was imagining everything, someone had finally caught the truth. The nightmare was over. My parents just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks later, Daniel called again. This morning, he said, your parents were officially served. I sat in complete silence. For years, I had imagined this moment. But somehow, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. The lawsuit accused Richard and Susan Bennett of intentional interference with employment, defamation, and financial damages. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone recordings, visitor logs, the signed register, copies of my father's handwritten notes, the photographs from his office. For the first time, they couldn't explain it away. The trial began 3 months later. My parents walked into the courtroom looking exactly the way they always had. Perfectly dressed. Calm. Confident. My father smiled at several people in the hallway. My mother carried her Bible under one arm. If someone didn't know the story, they would have believed they were the victims. Then Daniel began presenting the evidence. The courtroom became quieter with every exhibit. The recording of my father's conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes. No one interrupted it. No one had to. His own words were enough. Then came my mother's recorded phone call. She had introduced herself using a fake name. But the investigator calmly asked several unexpected questions. Without realizing it, she accidentally revealed details that only Emily's mother could have known. The silence inside the courtroom became almost unbearable. For the first time, my parents stopped looking confident. When Richard Bennett finally testified, he admitted making the calls, but claimed he had done everything out of love. I was protecting my daughter. Daniel stood. Protecting her from what? Richard hesitated. The world. Daniel nodded. So you destroyed every opportunity she had. So she would never leave you? Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. The jury reached its decision after less than 4 hours. They found both Richard and Susan Bennett liable. The court ordered them to pay substantial financial damages for the years of lost income and emotional suffering. But the money wasn't what mattered. 1 month later, I signed the lease on my very first apartment. It wasn't large. It wasn't fancy. But every key on that ring belonged to me. A few weeks after moving in, Karen, the same woman who had once been forced to withdraw my job offer, called me again. We have another opening. If you're still interested. I smiled. I'd love to come in. This time, no mysterious phone calls came. No unexpected visitors appeared. No one tried to stop me. I got the job. Today, I still keep the first apartment key in a small wooden box. Not because it opens any important door anymore, but because it reminds me of something I spent years trying to learn. Sometimes, the people who claim they're protecting you are the very ones holding the lock. And the hardest prison to escape is the one built by the people you trusted most. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you how important freedom, truth, and self-worth really are, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Take care of yourselves. And never let anyone else decide what your future should look like.